This lecture will focus on the time in the war that turned from kind of a stalemate where we're not sure who's winning to a turning point where the North really starts to get a big advantage. In the western part and all down the Mississippi River, the North was having a lot of success. Admiral Farragut had captured New Orleans and taken the Mississippi River Delta for the Union. Grant had seized all the way down to Memphis, Tennessee after winning at Shiloh. However, there was still one major Confederate stronghold city that was left on the river that gave them some control over it, and that was at Vicksburg. In Vicksburg, Mississippi, that was kind of it. And Abraham Lincoln said that Vicksburg was the key to victory and that the war could not be won unless they had the key in our pocket. And so he wanted Grant to go and take Vicksburg. And so he sent him down there to get a plan together on how they were going to take it. After looking at the circumstances, Grant decided that he was going to take his men, which were mostly up here, okay, and he was going to march them out across the river here and then come down and cross down to the south of the river, okay, and then they would come up and attack from the other side, okay, and so that was kind of their plan, was to make this big looping motion to attack Vicksburg from the opposite side. However, if they knew that was happening, then Vicksburg would be ready for them. And so what Grant did is he had Colonel Benjamin Grierson perform something known as Grierson's Raid in our history. He decided if he's going to go and do that, he's going to cross that river, pass it, and then come back attack from the south. He needed a distraction. And so he told this colonel, Benjamin Grierson, to take 1,700 cavalry troops on horses, and go on a raid through Mississippi, destroy railroads, destroy railroad depots, only fight in small little battles that you could win, and then run away from the rest of them. Just essentially cause havoc, make problems for the other side. And so they did that over the course of quite a bit of time. They traveled about 600 miles doing all of these things. And while that was happening, Grant's men were marching 180 miles in 17 days, and they ended up having to fight 5 different battles as they moved their way up through here, and then they slowly worked their way towards Vicksburg, fighting their way all the way. And so they were able to drive the Confederates back every step until the Confederates got into their defenses at Vicksburg. Now, of course, if they're all set up in their defenses, it's going to be very difficult to get them out of them because they're set up to handle an attack. And so what ended up happening here is Grant did try to attack. He tried to attack Vicksburg and get it over with quickly, but was stopped 2 times. And so he decided, instead of sending more men at it, he would just perform a siege. Now, a siege is a blockade, just like that other blockade we talked about before. This is a military blockade, so you're down on land instead of on water, but you're blocking a place that's fortified to make them surrender. So what you do is you cut them off from any of their supplies or food or anything like that, and then you just wait for them to run out of food. And so 6 weeks is how long the siege lasted, but 6 weeks later, the Confederate troops, as well as the people that lived in the city, were near starvation, almost dead of starvation. They decided to surrender. And so this was the success that they needed. The South was now cut in 2. They now had the key of Vicksburg in the North's pocket. And so now Lincoln was happy with what was going on in the West, but in the East there was just problems with the leadership, and we're going to see this as a very, very big theme as we're moving through. A lot of these generals just did not do a great job. And so General Mcclellan was the one that we had before, right? We talked about the Peninsula Campaign and all that kind of stuff. And Lincoln was really frustrated with him after his victory at Antietam, which doesn't make sense, right? Why would you be mad at him after his victory? Well, he had forced the South. He had forced General Lee to run, Okay, and when an army runs, when they retreat, you can kind of pursue them, get them in a bad position, and maybe completely destroy their army. And so Lincoln thought that McClellan could have destroyed Lee's army, but let that opportunity slip away. And not only that, but he moved so slowly back into Richmond that as he was trying to move and train and do all that kind of stuff, Lee was able to completely regroup, set up his defenses, and completely block any northern advance on Richmond, right? They just couldn't get down into Virginia and win those battles. And so on November 7th of 1862, Lincoln fired General McClellan and put someone else in charge. He really wanted somebody aggressive, and he selected General Ambrose Burnside. Okay, Ambrose Burnside, he hired him, and he said, you need to push into Virginia, go after Lee's army, and destroy it. Burnside and his men met the Confederate Army in Fredericksburg, Virginia, or near it, and suffered a terrible, terrible defeat. Okay, what ended up happening is they were all set up. The defense, or the Confederates' defense, was set up nicely, and they were in a good spot. And on December 12th, 1862, knowing Lincoln wanted him to attack, Burnside attacked Lee's troops, who were up in the hills, entrenched in a good defensive position. And in this battle, the Union had about 12,000 dead and injured, and the South had less than half of that. They only had 5,000 people, so it was 12,500, as you can see up here, casualties of the North and 5,000 of the South. And you can see it was an army of 120,000 versus an army of 78,000. The Union Army was definitely a much stronger, bigger army, but they were not in the defensive position, and so they lost that battle. On top of that, the other officers were kind of complaining about Burnside. They didn't like the way that he was running the military, and so he was fired very quickly after just that one major battle, and replaced with this man, General Joseph Hooker. General Joseph Hooker decided that he would split his forces up, send a large force, sneak them around to attack Lee from the backside, to attack Lee's forces from behind. Lee saw this happening, figured it out, and split his forces and sent some troops to meet those forces, which would happen in our next battle. Take a moment to write out the answer to checkpoint question number 1. This battle was the Battle of Chancellorsville. Hooker took his troops on May 2nd, 1863, and was heading towards Chancellorsville, Virginia. And Lee's troops attacked Hooker's troops in a deep, really heavily wooded area. It was known as the Wilderness near Chancellorsville. The Union had 2 times as many troops. It was definitely the much bigger army, but Lee was aggressive and honestly just the better general at this point. He was probably the best general of the Civil War. He was aggressive. He kept attacking and defeating the Union troops. And on May 5th, 3 days later, Hooker had to retreat and try and move backwards to try and save his army from total defeat. Lee was emboldened. He thought, we can beat these guys. We're winning. We're winning these wars, and we need to go and get victory in the North. Okay, we need to get that victory to get Britain on our side, to prove to everybody that it can be done, and try and end this war. And so he marched into Pennsylvania, taking livestock, which is like cattle and pigs and stuff like that, to feed themselves, food and clothes. Hooker was fired for failing to stop him from coming into the North, and a new general was put in charge. This was General George Meade. He was put in charge, and he headed north with his army to try to intercept and stop Lee and send him back out of the North. Lee continued to make this mistake of going into the North. His men were good at fighting in Virginia. They were good at fighting in the South. They could handle it, and they were winning victories there. But every time he went into the North, he put himself on someone else's home field advantage, right? And so Gettysburg was really no different. The Southern troops went into Gettysburg as they're in Pennsylvania, and they were actually going in there to look for shoes in the stores and stuff, and try and get those shoes and take them for their men, because they were lacking them so much. And they ran into some Union cavalry troops, again, troops on horses. They pushed the Union cavalry out of town, and the armies hurried, the big armies, not just the cavalry, to meet at the scene of this fighting. And the Union at this point had the defensive spot, they had the high ground, they had the best spot. And you can see their line is in blue over on this map here. Okay, so their line is in blue, and they're up on this ridge. And so they're up on a ridge, able to fire down if the South attacks. And they could also see the South moving from really far away and be able to react and move their troops to wherever it was needed, because that was where the South was attacking. And so they had a huge tactical advantage. The South tried to come in and take Little Round Top. Little Round Top is right here, okay, a little hill down on this side, okay. And they tried to take that because if they could take that, then they could use their cannons, their artillery, to shoot all the way down the line and hit all of the troops, the Union troops, and attack them from that spot. And so it would have been an extremely easy victory if they had taken this hill. But they were turned away, and they had sent such a big force. They thought, well, if the Union was able to turn us away, they must have taken like all of their troops from the middle of the line, and they must have gone to that edge to try to stop us from attacking there, and they're probably weak in that middle part of their line. And so General Lee made a really not a very good decision, and sent one of his generals, General Pickett, George Pickett. He sent him with 15,000 troops right up the middle at what he perceived or thought was a weak spot. Okay, and he sent them up there, and you can see the lines coming in. Right, this is Pickett's charge coming in here, and they tried to get to that line and shut him down. But while they were going, think of it from a ridge, from like a hill above. They were shooting cannons down on them and shooting volley after volley of bullets and rifle bullets at them, and just killing many of them. And so as they're running up trying to get to the lines, the Union troops ended up killing about 7,000, well, killing and wounding about 7,000 Confederate troops in 30 minutes. Out of their 15,000, only about 5,000 even made it to the line, and they were quickly overwhelmed by the Union troops. So this was a big mistake by Lee and a big victory for the Union troops. So the battle was going the wrong way, and Lee realized that he needed to rally his troops and try to retreat back into the South. However, the river to get across to the South, to get across to Georgia, was flooding at this point, and so he was not able to move his troops across the river and get back into his home field advantage. And so this was a point where he was extremely vulnerable and could have been completely defeated maybe. But General Meade thought his troops were very tired, not able to continue on, and decided not to attack the trapped Confederates, not to follow them more aggressively than he did. And so this is seen kind of as a failure, for sure, in history, but a lot of people say, this might have been the right decision, because it could have been a very long, bloody war, or a long, bloody battle, and if their troops were truly that tired, like, maybe it wouldn't have been a good thing. It might have gotten Lee that victory in the North that he needed. But regardless, the Battle of Gettysburg, there were a ton of losses. A lot of people were killed and wounded. The Union lost 23,000 troops, and the Confederate lost 28,000 troops killed or wounded in this multi-day battle. However, with the victory of the Union, it was a major turning point in the war. Why? Number one, in the North, with the victory, the popularity of the Republicans grew. There no longer was much of any chance that the Democrats were going to take the presidency or any of that stuff, and so the war would kind of see itself out to the end. Also, Britain, it was kind of finally decided that the Confederacy was probably not going to win this, and so Britain said, we will not recognize and help out the Confederacy in any way. And really, for the rest of the war, Lee's forces were fighting, they were trying, but they were kind of on the run for the majority of the rest of the war, just backing up, getting defeated. And really, what was the problem? It was that invasion of the North. Take a moment to write out the answer to checkpoint number 2. At around the same time, the battle was raging on in Tennessee as well. The Union really wanted to try and take Chattanooga, Tennessee, and the reason that they wanted that is because there was a major railroad hub, and they wanted this railroad to be or to be able to have control of it to get into Atlanta and easily get there with their troops. To be able to have an invasion route into one of the most important cities in the South and definitely the most important city in Georgia. And so the Battle of Chickamauga Creek happened. General William Rosecrans, this guy right over here, okay, whoops, that guy right here, he pushed Braxton Bragg, the other guy right here, right out of Chattanooga and was able to do that without a fight. They were not ready to fight and they had to retreat to a defensive position. The Union troops or no, sorry, he pushed him out of Chattanooga without a fight. He went to chase him down to try and take his army and completely destroy it. But Bragg was able to set up defenses quickly and then fight the Rosecrans and his army and break through the Union defenses. The Union troops did have to fall back. They did not win this battle. They had to run back and they retreated to Chattanooga, where they were almost completely surrounded by Confederate troops, leading to our next battle, which will be the Battle of Chattanooga. So the Battle of Chattanooga was a big one, and Abraham Lincoln knew that this was an important battle, and so he sent a lot of his best down there. He sent some of Meade's troops to help out. He sent 20,000 troops. He's able to move them 1,200 miles in 11 days. It was amazing. They built dozens of new trains, put these men on them, and moved them essentially all the way down to Chattanooga, Tennessee. He also put Ulysses S. Grant in charge in the West, and Grant headed to Chattanooga to take charge of this particular battle. Now, the Union forces tried to charge up on a Lookout Mountain, or were able to charge up on a Lookout Mountain and drive back the Confederates. But the Confederates were able to find this ridge, Missionary Ridge. So we're looking at the same kind of situation as Gettysburg, except for in reverse, where the Confederates are up on a ridge, and it really would not be very smart to attack them up on this ridge. Okay, and so Grant was trying to figure out what to do. He knew he had a lot more troops, but they had the high ground. They had the good ground, and it didn't really matter how many troops he had if he couldn't get them off of that ridge, because that was shown in Gettysburg. It doesn't matter how many you sent. They were just going to rain down bullets and cannonballs on you and kill you. And so Grant, trying to figure it out, knowing it'd be suicide to attack the ridge, he sent William Tecumseh Sherman up north in this attack up here, and tried to attack the north. It did fail. They weren't able to get any hold at all, and so they had to retreat a little bit. And then he sent 23,000 men just to do, some small limited attacks on the edge here. You can see all these blue arrows. Those were just these 23,000 men who were just supposed to do a small limited attack, maybe attack some of the people in front of the ridge and get a little more space to work with, and just be a diversion to keep the Confederates from attacking them. And these 23,000 men that went in as a diversion overran the trenches. They went all the way through. They defeated the Confederates in the trenches that were in front of the ridge, and they ended up continuing on and charging up the ridge. It was completely unbelievable. It was baffling to General Grant that they were even able to do this, and were able to push so far up onto Missionary Ridge that the South, the Confederate troops, had to retreat off of this amazing defensive position because of just the luck and bravery of these 23,000 men. And so now at this point, the Union now had solid control over Chattanooga, because they not only had Chattanooga, but they also had the defensive ridge on the outside of Chattanooga in their possession. So Ulysses S. Grant had seen a whole lot of success in this war so far, and he got rewarded for it at this point. He had given Vicksburg and won Vicksburg, the siege there, and gave the Union complete and total control of the Mississippi River. He had also then gone down to Chattanooga, and his men had fought valiantly and had a victory that cleared a path to easily invade Georgia, and have that railroad be kind of their main way of doing that. And then he was seeing so much success, and Lincoln was trusting what he was doing so much that Lincoln made him the general in chief of the Union Army. And not only that, but he got the rank, he got ranked up to lieutenant general, which he was the very first lieutenant general in the history of the United States not named George Washington. So since George Washington, he was the first one. So it was a huge distinction for him to get that. Uh, all right. And so Grant headed east to take over that part of the war, the part of the war that they were not as successful in, trying to take Richmond, and left the West to William Tecumseh Sherman. Lincoln had full confidence in this new general, which was a new thing for him. In March of 1864, he told Grant, "I wish to express." This is a quote. "I wish to express in this way my entire satisfaction with what you have done. Um, the particulars of your plan I neither know nor seek to know." So he's basically saying, I trust so much what you've done already that I don't even care what your plan is to win this war. I trust that you are going to win it. So that was kind of an amazing level of trust for Lincoln, who really had not had generals that he could trust the entire war. Take a little bit to write out 3 questions you have from the notes so far. If you don't have any questions, then create 3 test questions that you might see on a quiz or a test from this material.